all of the different facilities and Industrial Light and Magic, and he became an entrepreneur of sorts rather than an artist, But he had that artistness still in him, but he was just sort of he had entered so much into the world of commercialized fodder. It was, I don't know. And George Lucas, man, there's so much to talk about. I don't know if I should get into how people think of him as a money-making schemer, or as for instance, how he re-updates the original trilogy, with all his special effects. Just absolutely, it's barbarism, I tell you. It's pretty disgusting. Why he doesn't release the original films as they were originally edited. A bit of history is being lost there, Lucas, but I'll never understand that. That's another thing for another time, I suppose. But comes October 2012, we find out Lucas sells the thing to Disney, and Lucas has, my reaction wasn't, oh no, Disney's gonna turn Star Wars into Mickey Mouse, and that's what all my friends were doing. They were all freaking out going, oh no, Princess Leia, she's going to be a Disney princess. They're going to do t-shirts with Princess Leia next to Cinderella and Snow White. Oh no. And that's, I don't think that's what's going to happen, folks. Now this J.J. Abrams business, we'll get into that, folks, but don't you worry about that. But that was George Lucas just stepping back and saying, you know what, I'm just going to get back to my roots. I've had a 30-year time in my life dealing with this company and dealing with the Star Wars franchise, and I was actually cheering. After the initial shock of it, I was actually secretly deep within my heart, I was cheering for the guy and going, you know what, Finally, Lucas isn't bound by Star Wars. And I'll tell you something about the entity of the Star Wars franchise. I'm going to do something incredibly goofy here. I'm going to take Star Wars, and I'm going to say that is, hold on here. Okay, Star Trek. Let's say that Star Trek is a cult, right? It's a secular cult, and with ideals and philosophies. And Gene Roddenberry is the cult leader, right? We don't worship Gene Roddenberry. We just talk with him and interact with him and ask questions and follow him and all that sort of thing, but we don't bow to him. He's not God. When it comes to Star Wars fandom, Star Wars is a religion. I mean, George Lucas is God of Star Wars. And so we're always dealing with that. Is he a fair God? Is he a just God? Talking about George Lucas. And I don't mean to glorify George Lucas as God, like actually talking about the makeup of reality here. No. This is completely, off the charts metaphorical, right? Anybody who doesn't understand the level of meaning that these science fiction franchises holds for us in our lives, it's understandably they'd go, what? Let's not confuse God with George Lucas here. But no, it is that, and it's self-contained in its self-contained reality of fandom. It really is. And so, yeah, George Lucas just finally got away from Star Wars. And all right, I applaud Lucas for that. So I don't want to run in circles here. So let's keep things moving. And so now we deal with the reality of the Star Wars franchise being controlled by Disney. And just one more thing about George Lucas, though. He talks about how back in the early days of doing Star Wars, he wanted to keep it away from the corporations, keep it away from the people who would mess with it. They cut 5 minutes out of American Graffiti. George Lucas weeps for months about it. I mean, it just drove him batty. And now he trusts Disney enough to give them his all. And this is an exact quote from the guy. They put up a YouTube video of Lucas talking with Kathleen Kennedy, who now owns the keys, and somebody else. And, I wanted to put Star Wars. Well, the reason I'm doing this is so that the films will have a longer life. And I wanted to put it in a larger entity that would protect it. And that's what he did. And, wow, just sheer irony. Just epic, man. On a biblical scale. The just epicness and you looking at the fiction of the Star Wars creation and the reality of George Lucas's life. It really is kind of an odd thing. And if you don't get it, you're naturally thinking I'm crazy. But it truly, truly fascinates me and intrigues me. Whereas Star Trek isn't religious. You know, the Star Trek universe isn't about that. It's, you know, some people call Star Trek humanist, and yeah, I guess it is. But Star Trek at its best asks the questions fairly, you know, where Star Wars already has the questions answered. There's nobody debates, is the Force real? Where does the Force come from? No, they all know that. At least the religious people do, which would be the Jedi and the Sith and all that sort of thing. But the world is very coherent, whereas in Star Trek, we're outside of that and looking at it and judging it and reasoning and all that sort of thing. But that's a huge topic alone for itself. But where Star Wars, the point is, Star Wars is a religious atmosphere, a religious embodiment of everything in its sphere of, you know, consciousness. And Star Trek is more, it's not as, more worldly, I suppose, more just secular, you know, just, yeah, I suppose you get my point. So, man, it's fascinating. Oh, man, I'm rambling, I tell you what. So they're saying that the new Star Wars movie, Star Wars Episode 7, it's going to come out in 2015. And my initial reaction to that was, what? 2015? My gosh. I mean, it's like, all right, it felt like, all right, we've got our hands on the franchise. Now let's milk it, everybody. Let's get this movie out as soon as possible and cha-ching. That's sort of what it felt like a little bit. Like, man, excuse me. Like, what's the rush here, folks? We don't need to put a release date on it. Let's treat this with gentleness and care, and let's not rush ourselves saying, all right, Star Wars 7, 2015. You know, so this is what I want to get into now, is the creative processes and J.J. Abrams helming the next Star Wars movie. And, you know, we all thought that there was this locked-in thing called the Star Wars saga, and once that saga ended, then we got a cartoon, and once Clone Wars would have ended, it's still going on, but that's the cartoon, no duh. But once that would have ended, would we have gotten something out of Lucasfilm again? You know, so it's obvious that, well, you're like Revenge of the Sith, that implied closure, and it did, but we're still telling stories and filling in the gaps, and I don't know how long would Lucas have kept that up before saying, you know, all right, this is it. This is the package. And where the saga was presented as George Lucas's, this is like his artistic thing, you know, all 6 of them, right? That's the Star Wars package. This is beauty. This is awesome. And whereas Clone Wars just felt like this silly cartoon, just weird. Oh, but anyway, that's beside the point. I'm not here to talk about Clone Wars, but I will say this. Being outside the movie theater, and I saw that poster for it, and I was just looking at it, and I was going, you know, rated PG for smoking. Just, come on, facepalm. Could you hear it? All right, anyway. So, you know, I hear that they're bringing one of the, Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote Empire and Jedi, you know. I hear that he's having some writing involvement with the new Star Wars film, and there's all sorts of still speculation at this point. But one thing we do know, J.J. Abrams directing Star Wars 7, my gosh, my mind is blowing up. Huge. So now, I guess, is when we firmly plant the stake and say, okay, Kert Kaczynski. By the way, have I introduced myself yet in this show? Let's see, how many minutes are we into? Oh my goodness, we're over 30 minutes into this thing. And more. Have I introduced myself? Did I say I was Kert Kaczynski? I don't remember. I can't keep track of these things. But anyway, now and here is when I firmly plant the stake and say, okay, Kert, I've rambled long enough about Star Wars. I've reached to the point of where we are today, and now we're going to go back in time, but we're not going to go back to the early 70s or you know, even earlier than that. We like the 1940s when Lucas was growing up talking about the Flash Gordon. But we're going to go back to 2007, and I'm going to talk to you about the JJ And then